Associate Professor Walter Theseira.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had the best education one could receive on harassment on May the 9th of last year, when I inadvertently became the most hated man in Singapore for a day or two. I made a comment about CPF policy that was taken out of context. People thought I wanted the government to stop them from using their existing CPF money for housing. A Facebook post to that effect went viral, and I'm sure members can now infer why people hated me. Now, I'm aware that many members have had similar experiences receiving abuse online, as have others in the public eye. I hope members were prepared for the immense stream of criticism, some reasonable, some not, some gentle, some violent, that flows your way online. I was not prepared. It was an unpleasant experience that I don't wish to recall. But I share it today because I think it illustrates an important principle. While the law exists to provide justice, justice also requires that we play our part in understanding the limits of the law. The Protection from Harassment Act, with these amendments in place, will enhance the rights of private individuals to seek redress for online communication that harasses them. But individuals must also ask themselves if reference to the law is the most appropriate and effective means of solving the dispute at hand. I am not discouraging individuals or victims who receive credible threats of physical harm or who are exposed to sustained campaigns of abuse from using the full measure of the law against the perpetrators. A victim is the only one who can decide whether the law is the best recourse. But there are many reasons why people feel the need to spew invective online. The law is not always necessary to effect a good outcome for all. So let me now explain my side of the story. Last year, a reporter from the Straits Times contacted me to ask for my views on the President's address to Parliament, which was delivered on May the 7th, 2018. That address called for bold changes and strong steps to address the challenges facing Singapore. As I have some expertise on social security, I spoke on the role that CPF plays in providing both retirement and housing security. I was concerned that some Singaporeans might be over-investing in housing. Housing asset values are highly dependent on demographic conditions decades down the road, as well as on the remaining lease length. Hence, I suggested to the reporter that a bold reform might be to end the use of CPF for housing by focusing CPF purely on retirement and medical security, which also means cutting CPF contribution rates significantly. I never said that CPF funds should be locked up immediately so as to prevent the use of existing CPF money for housing. In the event, what made it through to the Straits Times was my comment on ending the use of CPF for housing and not the full reasoning behind it. I don't blame the reporter in the least because article space is scarce and many other experts were interviewed for a short article. If my comment had remained in the pages of the Straits Times, that would have been the end of it. However, someone from a website called Shuabo Singapore found my CPF policy suggestion interesting. Mr. Speaker, may I have your permission to display a slide on the screen?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So, Mr. Speaker, Shuabo Singapore created a post that caricatured what I said based on the Straits Times report, and that post went viral. The post asked if Singaporeans who are made homeless by my CPF policy suggestion should sleep in my house. The posting shows 3,800 shares. I'm sure there were more shares of different versions. At some point, people even got confused and thought that the President or the government were responsible for these suggestions on ending the use of CPF for housing. Of course, CPF is an emotive issue. I understand why people were so affronted. I provided some examples of the comments people left on the Shuabo Singapore post. You will notice people don't think much of my haircut. Plenty of insults on my appearance, on my qualifications, a few outright threats of violence. Of course, there were also more considered arguments, which I did not show here, and some who tried to appreciate the broader context of my views on CPF and housing. Now, were there any real risks to my personal safety? I do not know. As a university academic, where I work is public knowledge, and we have a fairly open campus. A gentleman actually turned up at the front desk of my university looking for me. The staff couldn't find me, so they sent him away, but he left his phone number. I called him. It turned out he had come to complain about my dangerous views on CPF to me in person, or perhaps to the university management. So I explained the context to him. It turned out he was not unreasonable, just misinformed. But it did cross my mind that perhaps not all unexpected visitors might be reasonable people. So why am I recounting this? I realized that resorting to the law wouldn't have helped anybody, least of all myself. There was a basic misconception about what I had said in CPF that I had to set straight. But more importantly, there was an opportunity to engage people in a discussion on what CPF policy should be and what are the trade-offs involved in the home financing decision. So I contacted the various parties to set the story straight. The Straits Times stood by the reporting, but they accepted that what was originally printed could be taken out of context. They adjusted the story. Shuabo Singapore likewise proved amenable to reason, and they corrected their story, and they publicized the correction. I want to put on record my thanks to all parties for helping me. I was not a nominated member of parliament back then, so it is not a question of influence. It's just people doing the right thing. And all of this was achieved without using any rights I might have under the law. I then posted a public statement on Facebook on May the 10th, setting out the reasons for my thinking on CPF and housing, and I invited a dialogue. Yes, I received some unreasonable insults and jokes, but I also had a large number of people willing to engage with me. I will not say I convinced all of them. What's more important is that we had an honest dialogue. If there had been specific threats against my family or friends, I think it would have been quite right to refer the matter to the police. Fortunately, I don't think anybody made such threats. And the random threats of simple assault, frankly, I didn't take too seriously, and they were really not as hurtful as the ones who took the time and creativity to insult me further. So nothing but my ego was bruised. I could live with that. It was an important lesson in not taking myself too seriously. We must treat each other with dignity, online and offline, no matter our political disagreements. And if we fall short, I hope that we will be treated with grace by the parties that we are offending. The law gives us rights, but justice is not always served by insisting on those rights. Mr. Speaker, I support the bill.